If you occasionally need very thin shim stock but are put off by the cost or the large impractical quantities it's usually packaged in, stay tuned. We'll show you how to get virtually unlimited material from an unlikely source absolutely free. Coming up right now here on Shop Tales and Lore. Shims and shim stock come in a large variety of thicknesses, shapes, and materials. They have almost unlimited uses, from simply leveling tools and shop fixtures, to auto mechanics, to adjusting mechanisms, to machine tool setups, and much more. A common problem is that most home shop enthusiasts need thin shim material so infrequently or in such small quantities that it's impractical to buy most commercially packaged materials and just as infeasible to make your own stock, considering the cost and complexity of specialty equipment designed for that purpose. If this sounds familiar, the lowly aluminum beverage can may be the answer. They're in practically every home, cheap as well as plentiful, and consistently measure very close to 0.010 of an inch thick. There are probably any number of ways these cans can be converted into shim stock, but because the aluminum is soft and thin, it works easily with common hand tools. Here's an approach that puts the fingers at minimal risk. Using a sharp utility knife or similar tool, slice one end from the can. The material in the end caps may be useful in some limited circumstances, but we're mainly concerned here with the thin, uniform aluminum that makes up the main body. Next, take a pair of sharp, fairly heavy-duty scissors and cut out the shapes that you need. Since we needed thin strips, I just made several parallel cuts along the length of the can. Sheet metal shears would probably work, but since they are made for heavier gauge material, my hunch is they would tend to leave this thin aluminum with upturned or curled edges, which really isn't ideal for shims. Also, this is a good time for a word of advice. Don't use your wife's sewing scissors. Don't ask how I know. After making the long cuts, I turned the can 90 degrees and cut along the bottom edge to free the shims. And here's a stack of plentiful, uniform shims that are just about as thin as most of us would have any practical use for around the home workshop. Speaking of practical uses, take a look at this one. When the tables got out of adjustment on our 8-inch jointer a while back, we used some of this same material to correct the alignment. The shims had to be doubled up in a couple of places, but it worked, and in the 5 or 6 years since, the tables have stayed in sync, and the jointer produces a perfectly straight edge on any length workpiece. That's really saying something for any jointer with a 75-inch bed, but more important, it shows how well these shims hold up over time.